No, I start. All right, welcome everybody. It was great meeting some of you before we began. And you know that today we are talking about complex text and how to approach it. I love this quote. What's really important, and this is from working with high school students, especially whether they're English language learners or regular English students in the mainstream. The biggest factor that affects success is the student's belief in his ability to succeed. So today we're going to look at some things that might help students to believe in their own ability to make sense of complex text. That's our goal. So I'm going to start with a little warm up, and I'm going to ask you to read this passage. I know a lot of words have been blocked out. I want you to read it anyway. And then I want you to just tell me in the chat, can you make sense of it? Do you understand it? You'll notice this is a passage for grades 6 to 8. So we're going to work a little bit in the middle just to make it easy for us. But can you get the gist of this? Can you make sense out of this, even with all those words blacked out?
I would say yes.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So, and I'm getting some in chat as well. So my question is, if that is true, what is the implication for our ENL students or ELLs as they approach complex text and they don't know a lot of the vocabulary words? What is the message that we want to give them? And that we can even do a little experiment like this and let them see it for themselves. This is one of the first steps. What are we saying to the kids, or what can we tell them? Use context clues to figure out the meanings. Absolutely, there's number one, okay? And you know, we tend to get over concerned, especially with ELLs, about giving them all the vocabulary. And that has an unintended consequence because they believe that if I don't know all the vocabulary, I'm not going to be successful. Exactly, you don't need to know all the words. Don't be, you know, put off by that. Right, so I see wonderful comments in chat. I'm seeing them. You're getting the point. This is a fun activity to do with your ELLs and let them just see. Don't worry about it. So there's our first step. All right, so I also want to spend a little bit of time before we get to central idea talking about how to look at vocabulary. And we want to be very focused. We do not want to sit there and give kids 25 words from a really complex text. So let's see, the first thing we want to do with our ELLs is maybe ask them to look for cognates and words with sufficient context clues. Cognates help them to see, okay, I can make some sense out of these words. They are somewhat familiar to me. Then there are some words to review or mention briefly. They're not really important. They're not going to see them, but they might be helpful to really getting the real depth of the text. So I might mention them perhaps in passing, perhaps with a gesture, perhaps give them a little chart with a couple of these words, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. And they're really not, I'm not expecting them to remember those. But there are some words that are worthy of in-depth study. And that's one of the things we're going to look at. What are the words and how do we determine? Maybe if we pick out 3 to 5 words and really study them in depth. So what makes a word worthy? Perhaps if it has multiple meanings and the kids need to be flexible thinkers and see this word could mean different. Or if the word has, can be broken into parts And there's a root and a prefix and a suffix because that expands and broadens their vocabulary. Or perhaps because it is a tier 2 word that goes across the curriculum and they're going to see it in many different contexts. So we want to think very deliberately about which words to teach. We also want to give some attention to transition words because they help us, and you're going to see later how they can really help us to think about the structure of the text and what the sentence is meaning. And finally, figurative language. It's important for kids, especially ELLs, they have a lot of trouble with figurative language and idioms. And to point this out and show them how to approach it is very helpful. So here's a passage, and I put in red, and this is the one that you read before, I put in red the tier 2 words. And I want you to look at those words and think about the criteria I suggested and tell me if we had to pick 2 or 3 words, which are the ones worthy of in-depth study. You can just speak out or put it in chat, whatever you prefer. Let's see what you come up with. I want no more than 3 words.
Converted.
Converted. Okay, very good. Converted, tempted, obtained. All right, very good. Maybe one more. These are all good choices. Okay, bestow. I see a couple of you put bestow and unpardonable. That was one of my choices. Bestow, I'm not sure about because it's
We
kind
don't
of
use that much.
word. I would mention that. All right, so let's see what I picked. And I picked tempt and pardon. But I also think converted is a good choice. So why? Because there are all these different forms of the word and I can do so much with it. And so here's a little chart I could use. And I could make up a sentence because teaching vocabulary, you have to give it a context. So here I'm showing them the word, and then I'm going to talk about the part of speech. Now, not that I really care that they can name parts of speeches, but to let them see that this word, now watch, here it's a noun, and look at this. Here it's a verb, all right? So to show them that this word can have different forms. This is the kind of study that you want to do with vocabulary. Then I've got pardonable, which is really excellent because it's, again, now if they understand what ABLE at the end of a word means, that's going to give them much greater depth of vocabulary. And finally, unpardonable, because the un is important, and this is an adjective. So we've got 2 adjectives here. So just a little activity like that is a good approach to vocabulary. Now, remember I told you we wanted to look at figurative language. And this is a chart that students find very, very helpful. It makes sense to them. So the text at the top in italics is the sentence that shows us figurative language. This bread I used to bestow upon the hungry little urchins who in return would give me that more valuable bread of knowledge.
Wow.
So that's a really good sentence for them to work with. And kids are pretty good at finding the sentence that has figurative language, but the Regents requires them to explain the figurative language. So first we ask what's compared, real bread and knowledge. Then I want to know what are some of the characteristics that are similar? Why would you put these 2 together? What do they have in common? Bread is a basic food. You need it to stay alive. And he's trying to tell us that he needed this knowledge. It kept his mind and his spirit alive. And then I need to be able to explain the figurative language. Douglas compares the knowledge he gains from reading to the bread he gives his teachers. Just as the boys needed the bread to live, Douglas needed the knowledge to keep his spirits alive. Now you will have these slides, and if you want to play with some of these with your students, I think that would be a great, perhaps even try some of these lessons with them. Now I want to just quickly, I know this is for 9 to 12, but I did notice that there were some administrators and teachers who are elementary. So look, here's the text. I just want you to see everything I'm showing you today, even though I'm going in the, the passages and examples are more middle school, you can do them from grades 3 to 12 and even into college. So just keep that in mind. So here's some text, and we see that this text has figurative language in it. right, so take a minute to read the text and then watch what happens with the chart. What is compared? The wind and his friend or a friend. What's similar? The wind moves and laughs in his face, and the loving gestures, they laugh together, they feel good. And here is your explanation. All right, so I just wanted you to see that you can do this at the elementary level as well as the high school level. So I just want you to either unmute yourself or put something in chat. How is this vocabulary approach different from the norm? And how do you think it would affect students' attitudes toward complex text? Again, feel free to just speak out or put something in chat.
Good afternoon, my name is Marie. And I think it's different because they're learning vocabulary in context, and which they should learn. Vocabulary should be used in context. And I like the fact that you actually gave sentences to help them understand the different parts of speech and how you use it in context. The graphic organizers too makes it easier for students to understand, to help to analyze basically what's happening with the language.
So what are we asking students to do with the vocabulary? Are we asking them to just give us back those words, or are we asking them, all right, it's exposure to more vocabulary, all right, words that are used in the beyond those in the text. How does it give them access? What are we saying here? How does this help them to approach complex text?
I think they'd find it more approachable or more reachable when we bring it to that, in that chart. I think they can see it better. It's a visual that goes along with the reading. So now we're reading and we're looking and we're hearing and we're doing all those things. So there are different entry points. I think they'll find it more accessible.
Right.
And I like, Rochelle, you said they're processing it. They're thinking about it. They're not just memorizing something. That does nothing for them usually, but they're actually working with it, making sense of it. And if they're comfortable with it, and if they realize, okay, I'm going to do the best I can, I'm going to figure out as many words as I can, and then go from there, they will be good. Okay, and figurative language is used to help them understand, how does this, what is the author trying to tell me? Because this really gets me to the meaning of the text. Now, I'm going to have to move on because we have little time. So let's just go to our next strategy for analyzing text. So look at this text, and nobody wants to read it. It's daunting, it's overwhelming, and you don't want to look at it. So let me give you a suggestion to get kids comfortable with this at first.
Break it up.
So we're going to start with a juicy, what we call a juicy sentence. We're going to pick one sentence to unpack and then kind of activate their thinking about what this text might be about. So here's the sentence that I picked. All right, so take a minute and read it. And then let's think about all the things we could do with this sentence. Just one sentence with the kids. Any thoughts? What would you do with that sentence?
The reading of the documents to utter my thoughts and to meet the arguments with words.
There's a lot. Any thoughts about that? One of the problems with that sentence is it's very complex. It's got lots of parts. So even to just break that sentence down and share with kids how that might look. So watch. Oh, first of all, what structure? What kind of structure does this sentence indicate we've got going in this text?
There's a passive voice here, the reading of these documents.
Yes.
Passive voice sentence, it's unusual.
And this is one of the state's suggestions for middle school, but what kind of structure are we looking at? Are we looking at sequence, chronological order, cause and effect, comparison contrast, problem and solution?
It's definitely problem and solution, because he's saying how he read and he was able to get evidence from what he has read to defend abolition.
Okay.
Yes, it's definitely problem and solution. Maybe he didn't know how to he believed that slavery should end because he was a slave, obviously, but he needed to get some tools some verbal weapons, and by reading, he got the verbal weapons that he needed.
Okay, I could work with that. I actually chose something different, but we could work with that as well. So let's just see where we go. First of all, I want you to look at this sentence and look at what I did with color. And remember I said you want to pay attention to transition words. So what does but while tell me? But while they relieved me of one difficulty, they brought on another, even more painful.
Events at the same time.
At the same time, but what do we know about these events?
Opposite thoughts.
Yes, they're contrast.
Yeah,
Okay.
opposite.
All right. So what do we think this text is about, and what kind of graphic organizer might we use to approach it? Okay, and I see people are putting things in chat. Excellent. Very good. I'm keeping track of that as well, but you're doing well. So look, here is a possible graphic organizer that we could work with. And again, we have to think about, and I'm going to talk to you about differentiation here. We want to think about how we can use this graphic organizer for students. So we know there are positive effects and negative effects, and the circle in the middle represents his learning to read. All right. So once I figured that out, I could ask my students if they're doing well, if they're strong readers, I could ask them to fill in these blue bubbles. Tell me what are 2 positive effects and what are 2 negative effects. After that, I could ask them to find quotes that support those ideas. All right, so I'm getting them ready to analyze this text and be able to talk about it. Now, I could differentiate this. So I could give them 2 blue bubbles, 1 for each, ask them to find one other. I could give them, if a student were really struggling, all 4 and ask them to find a quote. All right, so, or I could give them a quote and ask them to tell me what it means and work in the reverse. So this graphic organizer gives me all sorts of opportunities to differentiate depending on where my students are and what they need. So I'm going to pause 1 second and ask you if there are any questions or any comments about this before we go on. And while you're thinking about that, I want you to think, based on this chart, could you state a central idea? Would that help you to state the central idea?
We have to realize too that there might be a lot of unknown vocabulary even in these bubbles.
Yes, yes, that's true. So I might need to change the wording of the bubbles.
Right.
Absolutely.
I would
Very good point.
Simplify the language in the bubbles.
Yep. Very good. Excellent.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or comments or suggestions?
I'm thinking in terms of the complex sentence. We have a very, very long sentence that's pretty complex.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of dependent clauses. So I would separate those dependent clauses.
Mm-hmm.
I would use a slash to break up those dependent clauses and try to get meaning from each one.
And that's one of the really good things about a juicy sentence. That is one of the things you can do, and show them the syntax of that sentence, because there are a lot of complex sentences within this, and that would be a wonderful lesson to have. And I would have done that, except I have only 1 hour, so I'm trying to pick and choose which things I would do, but absolutely, that's an excellent suggestion. They could state the central idea based on this sentence. This sentence really leads them to the central idea. And then later on, remember, we want to build independence and gradually release responsibility. So later on, we're going to ask them to find the sentence that is really the key to the passage. But right now, I'm going to use this. So you're saying the central idea could be he argues against slavery. Absolutely. And what helped him to argue against slavery? The passage is, we can say that the passage is against slavery, but we could even be more specific. What is one of the issues with slavery?
Maybe it went against his conscience.
What went against, slavery went against his conscience?
Yes, when he read about it.
Well, I think when he read about it, he felt justified in his anger against it.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And so that's, in other words, he had words to express what he had been feeling. Remember, he was a slave.
Yeah, he was from
Right.
the English, right?
Yeah. All right. That slavery is a violation of human rights. Okay. So that comes out. So, all right. But how about reading? Should reading be part of my central idea?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So we might
Reading-
want to.
Reading helped him to understand his condition, to realize. his
Yes.
condition.
Yes, which was painful. So reading was good. He felt even worse. Yeah. So reading was good for him because he understood things and he had words to express what he wanted to say. He had arguments against slavery, but it was also very painful because he understood his condition even more. Okay. So again,
Ignorance is bliss. Once you read,
right.
you
And
have to
right.
take action. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm just trying to show you ways, some different strategies that you can use to get students really engaged in working with the text, pulling it apart. And just the way we're talking here, students could do that conversation. So again, I think when we tend to give them a central idea because we see that they're struggling, then they get the sense that if I didn't come up with that one myself, I can't do it. I don't know how. And so there's a learned helplessness that is an unintended consequence of some of our teaching. So what we need to do is get kids really grappling with this and talking about it and thinking about it and comfortable with, okay, all of the things that people said are things that they could support. So this might be a central idea. There are lots of different ways to approach this. So I'm going to approach this with the way that works for me. But again, we're also going to go a step further. We want to build that confidence, but then we want to teach students how to think critically about, okay, we have all these ideas, which is the best one? So that's where we're going to go next. So I just want to show you that there are different graphic organizers for different types of texts. And I also put in this chart the words that kind of are the ones that you would use for description. If you're talking about description, these are the kinds of transition words that you're going to look for. And this is a chart that you can use with your students. For chronological order, there are other transition words. So these words, students can use it to understand the structure of a text. They can also use it to write their own text. There was one Regents in August of a few years ago, and it was a short story that was so complicated that even I needed to take a graphic organizer on chronological order and kind of chart out what happened in the story so that I could then make sense of it and do the multiple choice questions. So this is a really good strategy for helping students. And again, here's the differentiation. I start by selecting the graphic organizer that I want the students to use. But eventually, if I've taught them how to unpack different types of texts, they have to learn how to pick the graphic organizer that would be appropriate for the text in front of them. And remember, compare and contrast. We have lots of things going on here. How are they alike? But then how are they different? And with regard to, that is the most important part of that chart, where you pick what are the areas that we're contrasting. And then once I've identified the areas, I can put details for both sides. And very important, summarize what is, so what? What is the importance of this contrast? All right, so that's a really excellent chart to use. And then finally, cause and effect, which is like the one that we used for the text earlier. All right, so any thoughts about using graphic organizers like this with students to unpack a text? If you want to put something in chat or say something before I move on.
They need a lot of practice with this sort of thing.
They
in my
do need a lot of practice, but I have found in working through with a lot of schools that this kind of work is very effective. Is there one document with all these graphic organizers? I don't have one, but you will have this PowerPoint, and perhaps you can, create something. It is very hard to do online. Yes, I am experiencing that myself. But I think, using this PowerPoint and these slides might be, give you an opportunity to do it with your students. Okay, so let's go on. So now we're going to play with this ourselves. First of all, I want you to see that we are going to work with 3 different standards as we look at the central idea. And this is very much what you have to do for task 3 of the Regents when we get back to that. So for those of you who are in high school, that's where we're going eventually. So the first thing is that we have to determine the central idea and analyze its development by picking out details. Okay, that's number 1. Notice it goes through grade 4. All the grades have something for all of these items. Then we have textual evidence, but it's not just, look at grade 10. It's not just pick the evidence, it's make logical inferences about it. That's where the analysis comes in, and that's what students have trouble with. When I look at the work students have done on the Regents, they tend to just give one piece of evidence after another, and they just give one quote after another, but they're not really breaking it down and explaining how that relates to the central idea. So that's a piece that we really need to give more attention to. So we're going to work on something. So here, first of all, is the standard, but I want to show you. Do not forget, and here's the writing standard. So you just saw 2 reading standards, and here's the writing standard. If you're talking about central idea, you're talking about informative or explanatory writing. The standard has all these different parts that are required, and very often teachers forget about these different parts. But to meet this standard, you have to have all of these different parts involved. So watch what we're going to do. We're going to turn the task into something with very explicit guidelines that students can follow. So what do you think would happen if students had these guidelines before they started working on the text? How might that affect their work, or certainly their writing? Any thoughts about that? Would the writing come out different from what you've been seeing if the students had these guidelines and they knew that these were the expectations? Absolutely, it could be a self-check. It could also be turned into learning targets.
Sometimes it's overwhelming, though, I think.
To give them all of this. Okay, so here's the thing, your students, and so you have to decide. So maybe you would give them 1 or 2 of these.
I think I would. I'm only going up to 8th grade at this point, but looking forward toward high school in that way, but certainly at the lower end.
Yeah, that's fine.
Graders,
as long as you know the guidelines, and then you can create a shorter version and give them pieces and break it down. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. We will get there. Okay. It helps them to decide what to annotate. Yes, because they're really looking for what is the best evidence. Yes, it could very well be a multi-day activity. So the first one is just looking at the reading, breaking it down, looking at what the central idea might be.
It's sequencing and pacing. I think this order suggests to the student their sequencing and pacing.
Yes, it does. And for the teacher, if even if you don't want to give it to the students, you've got it, and it can be sequencing and pacing for you as well. Yes, and
organize their thoughts is good. Yeah, organize their thoughts, right? Step by step.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, now watch. We're going to make it even more explicit for you. So here is a simplified version. For those of you who feel that's overwhelming, you might like this better. We need a thoughtful and clearly stated central idea. We need the most relevant textual references. Remember, the most relevant. So that's going to take some thought. We need analysis to link those references to the central idea and a conclusion. So this is a simplified version that you may prefer. All right, now, here's the process we're going to go through. First, we're going to ask students to read and get the gist and think or look and see if there's a statement of central idea or just state the gist themselves. Then, and we're going to try this out ourselves. We're going to brainstorm central ideas and we're going to talk about which are the best. And then once we've selected a couple that we want to work with, we're going to look for quotes and explain how they support the central idea. So notice I'm letting students work in pairs or in small groups. What does that do for the learning? How does that affect the learning?
I think they're more likely to take risks if they're working in pairs or in small groups.
Right.
That's
And it's
important.
It takes the pressure off them individually.
absolutely, it's not threatening.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. And if we get across this sense that there's no right or wrong answer, we're just looking for the best. All right, so here we go. Let's try it. So I need you to look at this passage. It's from the story 11, which is a great story, and it's a 7th grade story. And I want you to think about what is the gist? And I'm going to show you, I'm going to just show you here. You're going to go to the, actually, I'll put it in chat. You're going to go to Jamboard because I want to show you exactly how you could do this with your students if you have to be virtual. I'm putting the link into Jamboard and I want you to think about what the central idea is and then just kind of write. If you come up with something, I just put the link in chat. Come up with the central idea and put it on Jamboard. Now, if you downloaded the documents I gave you, you have this text there, so you don't have to read it on the screen. When you're done reading, give me a thumbs up if you're on, if you have your video on, so I can go to Jamboard and we can see what we've got going there. Okay, can I go to Jamboard?
Hi, Liz, if you want to, I can share Jamboard.
Oh, okay, yes, you're gonna share, no, but I have to get to my Google. I got this. Oh, good, people are already putting things on there, excellent. All right, let's see what we've got. So if you see two that you think go together, link them together. Let me just, are you sharing the screen, Anton?
Actually, I stopped, so you can share if you want.
Okay, actually, if you share it, because I'm already in here, that would help me out. I don't have to get back. Is that
Okay.
okay? All right,
Okay.
great. All right.
Yep.
All right, so look at your, people are moving them around. Very good. So, anybody want to vote? Yeah, if you see two that are pretty much the same, we could just put them together. All right, so let me ask you, what are you learning from doing this and looking at all these different comments? I'm going to go to the next slide. Can everybody see that I did that?
Let me,
No. Okay. So
Not
if you want
yet.
to go to the next slide, yeah. And I am going to suggest that we work with, all right, somebody pick one. Give me a statement that you think is really good for us to work with. I'll let you pick.
So someone said that your chronological age doesn't determine your emotional age. Another one is coming of age is complex. I like that one too. So,
No, it's great.
mhm.
Birthdays aren't always fun. Let's see, is that one there?
Okay, so what's another one? Say that again.
Birthdays aren't always fun. The one I was trying to put on.
All right. I put the apostrophe in the wrong place. Okay, one more. You mentioned one. I want one more.
Who we are today affects or is, what is it? Who we are today is a compilation of what we were in the past. Wait, who we are today is
First
shaped
one.
by who we were in the past.
Mhm.
We're a compilation of,
It doesn't have to be perfect wording. Remember, we're just talking about the gist.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
PL,
Who we are
The
today.
one about maturity.
Who we are today is
Shaped
shaped.
Is shaped by who we were in the past.
Yep, that's a good one.
Mhm.
I like the one that says maturity isn't based on age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
all right, so I'm giving 3. All right, so here's your next job. You can imagine what you're going to do next. You need to go and look at the evidence. So I have to put that back. Anton, can you put that back up?
In the text.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now look at the text. And when you find evidence that you think is good for one of these, put it here in that color. Now, we only need 2 or 3 pieces of evidence. So see which one. The game is going to be, as you look at the evidence, you're going to figure out which of these is the easiest to work with. So let's see what you come up with.
I'm sorry, where is the text again? Where is the text?
Okay, let me share
Picture.
that.
I
Let
don't-
me share that again. I'm
Let's-
sorry.
yeah, you have to share it again.
I'm going to are you going to share it again?
No, you have to share it again.
I will share it again. Okay, here we go. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
now remember, you don't want it to be too long. And remember, I'm going to say one other thing. It can be a quote or it can be paraphrasing, giving an example that's in here. It does not have to be a quote. So let's keep those 2 things in mind.
Okay.
hear people typing. That's great. So can I go and look at the Zoom I'm sorry, Jamboard? Let's see.
Okay, I'll do it. Let's,
Okay. So what are you're gonna put Jamboard up?
yep.
Okay, great. All right. Oh my goodness, look at all the circling. Okay. So what does this tell us? Which was the easiest statement? Which did you find the statement the easiest to support with evidence? Any thoughts? If you had to write this essay.
The first one, your chronological age doesn't determine your emotional age.
Mhm.
Okay, do people agreement? So let's move everything else out of the way and just look at that part.
Are we on page 1 or page 2 of the
We're on page
Jamboard?
2. Yes, sorry.
Who we are today is shaped by who we were in the past is also really just a broader, like some of them are more broad, right? Some ideas are more broad.
Mm-hmm. So the question really is, and I just wanted you to play with this briefly because we don't have a lot of time. My question to you is, and perhaps stop sharing, Anton, thank you, because I want people to participate. So what did you learn from this activity? And what do you think students would learn from this activity about central idea? And even about how to approach it? Any thoughts?
Hi, I think number one is that there's usually more than one central idea, but we have to pick out the best one that we could find the best evidence for. So while all those central ideas looked great, there was clearly one that we could find more evidence for easily.
So isn't that a powerful message for students?
I think so, yeah.
Who think that, okay, there's one central idea, I don't know how to get it, so I'm kind of lost and I'm not even going to try. But if they see, okay, I could work with a lot of these, but I can also learn from my peers how to pick the best one. So that might come later on. But at least we build this confidence. All right, there are lots. And you can pick evidence. All you need are 2 pieces of evidence. You can go with that, do it, try it. All right, any other thoughts?
And that a central idea has to be backed up with evidence, and you don't need a stack of evidence. You need 2 points. Let's start with 2, and later on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now my next step would be to put you in little groups and ask you, okay, here's the evidence that you said you would use. Explain how it fits the central idea. Talk about it. Before we write, let's rehearse it, especially if you've got ELLs and their oral language is better than their written language. Let's talk about it. Any other thoughts?
Good way to communicate with each other. Students, this is a good way for students to communicate.
And they're longing to do that. They
Mhm.
want to interact and they want to work together.
Liz, there's some comments in the chat. You may want to look
Okay,
at
oh,
them.
thank you. Okay, I think, oh, don't argue with the text. Yes, absolutely. Don't try to fit a, a round thing into a square peg or whatever, find something that you can work with. And there can be one central idea, but different themes. There are different ways to go about it. And I have seen students who came up with it might be very unique. Nobody else came up with it, but they passed the assessment because they could support it with evidence. And that's really what the requirement asks them to do. So remember, I told you at the beginning, my goal is to build the confidence that they walk into an assessment and they say, all right, I've got this. I can do something here and I'm willing to persevere. It might take a lot of time, but I can do it. Also, they can persuade others why they feel one idea is better than another. They're going to learn a lot from each other. And that's where you can do flexible grouping. So you might put some of your stronger students with some of your weaker students so they hear that thinking and it's not just coming from you. Any other reactions before I continue sharing the PowerPoint? Okay.
Might
So,
make their
yep.
their peers thinking visible by looking at the Jamboard and reading what others are writing. It's transparency.
Exactly. So it's non-threatening.
Yeah.
If I'm willing to take that risk. All right, so here is a chart. And again, in other workshops, I show how this gets filled out, but we don't have time, but I want you to see, this has been very, very useful. They put the statement of central idea in the first box with the blue, then the evidence that they got from the text in the second, and then their explanation. Then they have their second piece of evidence and their explanation. So how might this affect student work on central idea? What would this do for them that maybe they haven't been doing so far? What does it really cause them to pay attention to?
Each paragraph of what they're going to write in their essay is mapped out for them in this graphic.
It's mapped out for them, yes. And also the explanation, it's putting attention on the explanation. All right. So it's going to get them not to just give you a list of evidence, but to explain each piece of evidence. And the color coding, they can then color code their paragraph and they can see, okay, do I have enough red in this paragraph? And if I don't, then there's a gap. I need to take care of that. And they can give each other feedback by color coding and looking for the different parts. This tells the kids what to look for in each other's work. So this is a very useful chart for students. So the next thing I want to show you is how a lesson might be shown, how it might look. And notice I have what the teacher does in the left-hand column, and I have what the students do. So you can see in each column on the right, the students have to give me evidence of their thinking. All right, so this is very student-centered learning. Now I want you to take a minute, focus on the right-hand side, and tell me the letters where students are demonstrating flexible thinking, because this is an important strategy for kids. And I'll open up the chat and you can tell me, what are the letters where students are demonstrating flexible thinking? You're looking at the right-hand column.
Definitely B, because we spoke about the fact that there can be different central ideas, but you have to get the best evidence to support your central idea.
Okay. All right, C is flexible. Why is C, all right, why is C flexible?
I think by moving them around, they're forced to read them and then group them, like, what do you call that? Sorting.
Right.
They're sorting things out there and they have to be flexible to be able to sort them in more than one way. Someone will sort them a different way, put them in a different category. So you have to think more than one way.
Right. But you're also thinking, okay, I had one idea, but now I'm looking at other ideas that my student had and maybe one is better. So I'm being open to other possibilities.
Flexibility, reconsidering.
I can't hear whoever was speaking.
I was just saying that shows flexibility when you are able to reconsider and change your point of view based on evidence, what you consider to be evidence.
And really, this is a super important skill, as important as the reading standards and the writing standards. So look, these are the places where I saw flexible thinking. All right, and that's basically what you said. And notice at the bottom, talking about it. What are the benefits? How did it help you? How do you feel about your work? Giving students opportunities to think about their thinking so that they can transfer it to other learning later on. So now I want to show you some learning targets and notice how these learning targets fit the whole process that we talked about. I'll give you a minute to look at them. And I want you to think about, all right, I know you don't want to overwhelm the students. So how would you use these learning targets? Any thoughts about how you would approach them if you wanted to use them? And do you like them? Tammy, I like your comment about the revision. The revision is very, very important. And notice we had them writing one paragraph and revising it. I didn't really talk about that, revising it before they go on to write another one. That's really important. Okay, so you, Danielle, you might give them all of these at the beginning of the lesson and say, this is the whole process. For some students who are independent learners and they're ready to do this, that would be great. Not for all, okay? I agree. So for some students, I might just give them one at a time. For some students, I might decide, okay, I'm going to focus on the first 4 and maybe the last one. And I'm not, and just decide 1 or 2 per lesson. Absolutely. So what determines how you give these? What's going to be what's going to determine it?
The activity that we're doing for the day.
Well, the activity you're doing for the day, but something more than that even.
Students' proficiency level.
Yes, who are your students? What are they ready to handle? So that's why I can't tell you how to do this. You have to know your students and you have to know, okay, and you may have some students in your class who you give the whole thing to, and you have some students who you're going to give it piecemeal.
Mhm.
So let me just say, your next step, what would you be your next step? If I gave you a packet, and if you are in elementary or middle school, the packet I gave you only has high school texts, and they're from Appendix B. If you are in one of the earlier grades, then what I would like you to do is send me an email and I'll send you the packet, or I'll put it in with the materials that are, that you have the link to. If you don't get that, send me an email and I'll give you some passages that you can work with, unless you have your own. So start with, what are the words you want to analyze? Is there any figurative language you want to interpret? Is there a juicy sentence you want to use? What are some possible central ideas? It's good for you to have a sense of what you're looking for before you ask the kids to do it. And then think about, what graphic organizer? I gave you all those possible graphic organizers. Which one works for this text? So these are some questions that you might ask yourself in preparing. Now we are going to have a follow-up session for coaches on April 14th. If you're an AP or a coach, then you can come to the session on April 14th. You see that there is a link here to a slide deck. Before April 14th, I want you to, if there's a passage you're working on, a question you want me to do, something you want me to talk about, put it on that slide or email it to me. Because I will not be doing a presentation on that day. I want to answer your questions. But I can give you better responses if I see the materials or the lesson you came up with, or I'm thinking of this graphic organizer for this text. Show me your thinking. And if you're an administrator, what do you see as your teacher's needs? What are your questions? If you are a teacher, on April 21st, we really want you to bring some student samples. And again, those will go on the slide deck. So then we can look at the samples and we can talk about what we see in the student work. And we could talk about, okay, if this is what the students did the lesson work? What parts of it worked? What parts didn't they understand? And what are our next steps? What do we need to do next? Are there any questions about that before I go further?
Do we copy that URL now? I'm sorry, do we copy?
No, you did.
URL?
It's all on the handout that you got, that so you can, or you could copy it now, but it is on the handout that you received.
Okay, thank you.
Does somebody have those links that you received? Because there's a link to a final survey. I was just wondering if somebody could post it. Now, this is what the slides look like. I just wanted you to see. So at the bottom, you tell us your school, your grade, and who are the leaders you're working with. Give me a piece of the text. Tell me what you're thinking of doing. All right, if you want, or just send me whatever. And for the teachers, give me your sample of student work so that we can analyze it and see what is working and what we need to do next. Here's some suggestions for working through the process. Determine what words you want to do. And this is just here for you as a reference for as you're doing the work, or administrators if you're working with your teachers. And this is the link that I need to give you in the chat. Oops, and I just lost it. Let me see. I might have to end the show to do that.
Let me see if I can share this for you, Liz.
Oh, okay, let me know, because otherwise I will do it.
Is this what you're talking about, Liz?
No, I wanted to
Oh,
share
that
the
link.
link. Yeah, I wanted to share the link for the survey.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
When you
so-
stop the PowerPoint, you can do it. Just stop the sharing.
Oh, that's it,
Do-
sure, yeah, okay.
Okay, try now, Liz. Try to share your link now.
Okay, let me, all right, let me just do this. I have to end the show. I'm sorry. I should have had this set for you. But while I'm doing
No,
this,
just
are there,
end the share.
are there any questions or suggestions? Here's the link. And it's very important that you fill this out for us. Okay, there you go. It's just a couple of questions. Please give us thoughtful answers, because we will use those to think about how to help you better.
Are they filling out the the
The
evaluation
survey,
now?
yes, I hope so. Everybody got that?
While you fill out the evaluation, I didn't say this at the beginning of the session, but this presentation is sponsored by the New York State Language Auburn at NYU. We will have more sessions with Liz. Now we're trying to see if we can get a group of schools that we can work with intensely, where we actually train a group of teachers that principals can actually use to and use them as labs. We intend to continue some of these workshops in the coming year. So we're testing some of these things out, see if people are interested. So that's even more of a reason why it's important that you actually put your comments in the evaluation and you give us some guidance so that we can do more targeted professional development. The director it's not possible for him to be here, but he will be here in the next session. His name is Ram Wu. And if you have any questions, you can send the questions to Xiomara, who is the one that sent you the link to the presentation today. I hope that you do try the assignments. We did do this kind of activity with another group of schools, and they were very receptive, and it was very helpful. So we just want to be able to help everyone in their craft, because when they help English language learners, they're really helping a lot of students, because you well know that a lot of these strategies can be used with any student, regardless of whether they're ELLs, special ed, or whatever.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
so thank you very much for your participation. You can check out our events in the website that Veronica just put on the website, on the chat. We have a lot of workshops. As a matter of fact, we have a workshop coming on Monday for students that you may have that qualify for the DREAM Act. So the teacher can attend, the guidance counselor can attend, the parent and the student can attend. It is being sponsored in collaboration with Unlocal, which is an agency that actually supports immigrants in completing the form for the DREAM Act. This is a lot of the things that we do. We're coming up also with a workshop with Nancy Cloud very soon. Many events that we have to support teachers of English language learners. Thank you very much. And please don't forget the survey.
I sent the survey out to the emails and I also just copy pasted it into the chat. So you can go directly to the feedback survey and it only takes about 5 minutes or less.
There it is, yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's what the survey looks like. It's pretty straightforward.
And Gloria, I will send you the responses when I get
Please.
to.
Thank you.
Okay. This was a great group. Thank you for those of you who participated. You were wonderful and it really made the session much more interesting. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Auburn, can you please stay to debrief with for a little while? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Very wonderful. Thanks.
Yes,
Pat.
thank you. Good
Mr.
job.
Tron,
Yeah,
if you
thanks,
want
Thank
CTLE
you.
credit, send me an email. If there's CTL, if you send me an email, I will send you a form.
Actually, the
Or do
Auburn
you have that? Oh, you
automatically,
do that? Oh, okay, never mind.
yeah, the Auburn automatically gives them
Okay.
that if they
No.
put it in the